Part 35. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 341. Chapter 341 finally reveals his true face. After taking the USB flash drive back, Luo Yuanhang listened to it many times, carefully, going back and forth. Even though it was just a voice message, he also knew that Su-Yun had definitely seen the meeting between him and Chu Zinggao that day, and their actions were all under her nose, but he didn't know it yet. Looking back and thinking about it, I felt a layer of cold sweat break out on my back. He thought he was in the dark and she was in the light, that he was a mantis and she was a cicada, but he never thought that she might not be a cicada at all, but the oriole behind him. Sure enough, I still have to be more careful. But what made him feel a little more at ease was that Su-Yun obviously didn't know much about his transaction with Chu Zinggao, and so far, the cause of Mr. Chu's death could not be determined for the time being, and after listening over and over again, he was most interested and shocked by the results. Yes, what method did Su-Yun use to poison Chu Zinggao? Because the audio is audio and the picture cannot be seen, I can only vaguely guess from the voice. Chu Zinggao's reaction does seem to be poisoned, or that he fell into Su-Yun's trick. From her words, it seems that she wants to know what is going on. You can even add poison to the fragrance. If this is really the case, that is simply terrible. He himself is not a perfumer, but after all, he has been involved in this industry for so many years, and he has far more perfumers than Su-Yun. He often goes to the laboratory to learn about it. He has never heard of being able to add it to perfume at will. What kind of poison is it? If you smell it, you will be poisoned. Is this thing true or false? Is this possible? However, regardless of whether there is such a possibility, if this point is captured, it can be put to good use. A perfumer can create perfume containing toxins at will. If word spreads, it will definitely shock the world. Maybe, she will be controlled as a dangerous person. This way he can take revenge. Even if this incident is false, it will cause panic. Who will dare to buy or use the perfume she makes in the future? Thinking of the dawn, Luo Yuanhang thought over and over again if there was anything he wanted to miss. After confirming that there was no problem, he stretched his shoulders and took a deep breath. No wonder Yun Chugzhu asked him to listen carefully. It seemed that she probably thought so in her heart. After recording the confession, everyone was released. After all, there was no conclusive evidence so far, and they were just waiting for the forensic doctor's final conclusion. Su-Yun and Chu Chen sat in the same car back home, and it was extremely quiet. I don't know how long it has been since the brother and sister sat in the same car and traveled together. When she was a child, she spent most of her time at Chu's house. As the eldest grandson, Chu Chen followed Mr. Chu everywhere. At that time, she was very envious, thinking that Chu Chen didn't have to be forced to practice every day and could go out to play every day. In fact, when he grows up, he realizes that what he has to bear is much more than himself. Chu Chen's practice always started before dawn. Every day he went out was not for fun, but for various studies, but he never said it out loud. Chu Chen's face was cold, but his heart was not cold. Is everything okay over there at the company? Su-Yun took the initiative to break the awkward silence. She knew that his company still had some matters to deal with, but she wasn't quite sure what they were. After all, she couldn't help much if she didn't intervene in the company's affairs. It's okay, he still looked calm. The two words Yun Dan Feng Qing actually took a lot of effort to solve, otherwise it wouldn't have taken such a long time. Calling the police will definitely have an impact on the reputation of the Chu family, Su-Yun said as her eyes slowly fell out of the window. Nothing is as important as Grandpa, he said every word. Although the commotion did have a great impact on Chu, the two of them still have a common consciousness on this point. He spoke few words and was not good at words. Su-Yun chatted with him for a few words but couldn't speak much, So she fell into silence again. The car quickly drove back to the Chu family. After a few days of turmoil, the entire Chu family seemed to be shrouded in gloomy clouds and gloomy. That's not right, Soo-yoon soon noticed something was wrong. She frowned and raised her ears, feeling that the aura and overall atmosphere around her were wrong. Although the Chu family was originally so quiet and the disciples were all scattered, martial arts practitioners are naturally sharp, and the overall feeling when they get off the bus makes people very uncomfortable. The feeling of depression is overwhelming, as if there are enemies hidden in all directions. She can feel it, and so can Chu Chen. Frowning slightly, his eyes glanced over casually, only to feel the movement of the wind, and then a figure suddenly attacked from behind him. To be precise, there were two attacks. Two people attacked from behind Chu Chen and Soo-yoon respectively. They came fiercely and moved very quickly. Their movements were already very fast, but in the eyes of Chu Chen and Soo-yoon, they were still slow. They easily dodged and counterattacked quickly. He circled behind the opponent, then raised his hand and slapped it with his palm. At the same time, he counterattacked the opponent's arm and pinched their throat with one hand. Who is that person? Forced to squat down, the two people did not speak. Chu Chen and Soo-yoon looked at each other, raised their arms and knocked out the two people almost at the same time. The feeling of oppression around me not only did not disappear, but actually got worse. Papa Papa, the sound of applause came, and Chu Zinggao walked out. He came back first, and he came back with a storm. My good nephew and niece, you are really good at skills. He smiled proudly and stood in the middle, acting like a master. Do you think that just calling the police will do anything? I originally wanted to be as peaceful as possible. We should be gentle and resolve this matter, but you refuse and insist on fighting to the death. Since you are so stubborn, you can't blame me as an uncle for being cruel. He leaned forward, smiled triumphantly, and his attitude was extremely arrogant. What, you finally revealed your true colors, Chu Chen said coldly. Is Grandpa's death related to you? Chu Chen couldn't figure this out. From all indications, it was a coincidence that Chu Zinggao came back. It seemed impossible to say that his grandfather's death had nothing to do with him, but if it was really him, the timing didn't seem right. What's more, before Grandpa passed away and he hadn't come back yet, where would he have the chance to take action? Most importantly, he didn't want his grandfather's death to be related to Chu Zinggao. If it was really him, how sad would his grandfather be? Ha ha ha, are you still struggling with this? After laughing a few times, Chu Zinggao sneered, don't you should be more worried about yourselves now. I will take back whatever the Chu family owes me today. His expression became ferocious. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 342. Chapter 342. The rumored top player. Chu Zinggao waved his hand, and Soo-yoon felt that there were people rushing towards her from all directions, and she was obviously surrounded. She lowered her head and dodged almost instinctively, followed by a quick whirlwind kick, and kicked away the person who rushed towards her. Then she punched out directly, knocking back the person who was attacking behind her. Waiting for her to attack again. When he settled down, 3 or 4 people had fallen down around him. With a quick glance, he saw that Chu Chen was also responding to the challenge. He didn't have time to look further because more people rushed forward. Although the skills of these people are not as good as hers, they are obviously one level higher than the disciples of the Chu family. It is not because of their deep skills, but because their moves are too fierce. Although the Chu family is a family of ancient martial arts, they practice martial arts first and cultivate virtue, and they also emphasize benevolence in their moves and cultivation, defending themselves as well as attacking. However, every move of the person attacking them at this moment is extremely vicious, and every move is fatal. This is the first time Soo-yoon has encountered such fierceness and cruelty. Growing up, although she practiced martial arts with her grandfather, all she came into contact with were the children of the Chu family. In such a peaceful and prosperous age, there was no need for her to do anything. Except for the interception against Luo Yuanhang, it was the first time he took action in so many years. After fighting a few moves and repelling a few people, she glanced distractedly at Chu Chen and saw that he was only blocking and repelling him. It didn't look like there was any danger at the moment, but he was still overwhelmed. This cannot continue. These people are endless. If they are not ruthless and still have reservations, they will only be entangled for a long time. Even if they can beat them, their physical strength will be exhausted. As soon as her mind moved, the fist of the person facing her was already close to her eyes. She did not dodge, and raised her hand to hold the opponent's fist. The opponent's strength was so strong that she could not move forward any further. Then Su Yun's eyes were filled with anger, and she turned her wrist. Folded hard, click. Only a crisp sound was heard, followed by the man's wailing. The next second, Su Yun turned his arms and body over, and kicked him hard in the crook of the leg without hesitation. He knelt down on the ground with a controlled snap, and there was another crisp sound. She let go of her hand again, and the other person fell limply to the ground, unable to move any more. This series of actions was done in one go, not to mention the other people who were attacking. Even Chu Zinggao, who was standing on the outside and watching, was stunned and speechless. This girl, why is she so powerful? Although Chu Zinggao's skills have been wasted, he has learned a lot and has a solid foundation. He can still see the skill of the opponent, the speed of his moves and his skill. He didn't take a little girl like Su Yun seriously before, but at this moment, he had to re-examine her. In just a short period of time, her whole aura changed. She struck decisively, and her movements were crisp and smooth. The most important thing was that the power of her punches and kicks would not have been achieved without deep skills. The result of even Chu Chen seemed slightly inferior compared to her. And her action obviously also calmed the other people. They were stunned for a while, and no one came forward for a while. After solving the problem in front of him, Chu Chen was also slightly surprised when he saw her method. He once heard his grandfather mention that Su Yun was the most established and potential martial arts school in the family. Even though he heard this, he didn't take it to heart, let alone take it seriously. Because of the different training methods and the time difference, he and Su Yun rarely had many opportunities to practice together. However, they had practiced a few times and had fought against each other a few months ago. At that time, he only felt that she was neglecting her practice and her movements were unfamiliar. However, just now, at that moment, Chu Chen almost felt like he didn't recognize her. Chu Zinggao was shocked, probably because he didn't expect her skills to be so powerful. He took 2 steps back and shouted, "Up! Up!" Before Su Yun stepped forward, she felt a cold wind and a sharp edge coming through the air. "Be careful," Chu Chen yelled, her eyebrows moved, she turned slightly sideways to avoid the oncoming blow, moved her feet, and spun around quickly. The opponent's movements were also very fast, and she could only see 2 people at once. The figure moved quickly. "Chu Zinggao, you actually colluded." Before Chu Chen finished speaking, someone was attacking in his direction. He had no time to say more and could only respond immediately. One on the left and one on the right, both sides were fighting fiercely, and the skills of these 2 people at this moment were obviously many times better than those before. Su Yun gathered her mind and concentrated on fighting. After fighting dozens of moves, she finally saw that the person she was fighting with was a very vicious-looking person. He had a beard on his face and a strong build. He kicked him a few times, but the other party didn't even frown, as if he didn't feel anything at all. The other person who fought against Chu Chen was relatively fair and clean. He looked more like a weak scholar than a thug. However, Every move he made was extremely ruthless, with a faint smile on his face. Facing him, Chu Chen couldn't find any luck. The beard is dressed in black, showing strong muscles on the body, while the frail scholar is dressed in white, and is very thin. If you guessed correctly, these two people are the famous yin and yang double kill in the ancient martial arts world. In today's developed society, the ancient martial arts world seems to have declined, and there is little news or achievements about the ancient martial arts family from the outside. However, it is not that the ancient martial arts family has declined or disappeared. On the contrary, the ancient martial arts world has its own prosperity. It's just that everyone has different development directions. Just like the Chu family, they only accept a few disciples, practice martial arts, and mainly engage in business. From the outside, it seems that they are in decline, but in fact, the focus has shifted to make a living for the family. Just development. The other type gradually disappeared from the public view and found a more secluded place to live, such as an island or a mountain forest. They gradually lost contact with the outside world and thought that those ancient martial arts families had disappeared. This yin and yang double killer is a member of the Yu family. Over the years, the Yu family has long lost news. I didn't expect to see these two people in the legend now and even have their hands on each other. So, the supporters behind Chu Xinggao are the Yu family. A lot of thoughts went through my mind in that moment. When I was distracted for a moment, my left shoulder was almost hit. Fortunately, Su Yun recovered quickly and quickly avoided the palm, feeling shocked. If the palm hit just now, I am afraid that the shoulder bone will be broken. The rumored top master is indeed very powerful. Hurry, capture them both, Chu Xinggao, who was standing aside, shouted anxiously. Originally, he could still get a general idea, but now the two sides are entangled and it is difficult to separate them for a while. He was originally sure that there would be no problem, but now he is a little shaken. No, I cannot. He purposely borrowed both yin and yang, so there is absolutely no way anything could go wrong. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 343. Chapter 343, 1 against 2. When he shouted, the movements of yin-yang double kill were obviously faster and the moves became more powerful. Chu Chen never expected that these two people would appear. He was so frightened that he could only fight with all his heart. However, after facing hundreds of moves, he still couldn't decide the winner. When Chu Xinggao shouted from the other side, he glanced distractedly, and then looking back, he saw that the opponent's feet were already close in front of him, and he hurriedly dodged back, but in the end he was still a step too late. His chest suddenly felt tight, and a mouthful of hot blood spurted out of his throat. He was injured and fell out. Seeing that he was injured, Chu Xinggao breathed a sigh of relief, and his expression became less nervous. He raised his voice and said, "Don't kill me, I want to live." His purpose in returning to the Chu family was just to gain control of the family, to get back what he wanted, and he didn't want to cause too much trouble. After all, he is still a member of the Chu family, and it is of no benefit to him to cause trouble. He just needs them to be obedient and willing to listen to him. Chu Chen, Su Yun, why bother holding on and just listen to your uncle? Now that your uncle has become the head of the Chu family, he won't do anything like expel you from the house. Tell me, you are injured. I can't bear it either. As he said that, he simply pulled a chair from the side and sat in the middle to watch the show. At first he was not too sure, but when Chu Chen was injured, he felt that everything was stable, and he knew that it was right to invite yin and yang to kill him. If he only relied on a few wine bags and rice bags, it would not be possible at all. He narrowed his eyes and looked up at the sky. It's getting late. As long as you agree to let me be the head of the Chu family and promise to listen to me and respect me from now on, I will ask them to stop. How about that? Although Chu Chen was injured, he still didn't stop and continued to take the attack. When he heard his sarcastic remarks, he refused directly. Dream. Tisk, tisk, since you are so disobedient, then I, as an elder, can only teach you a lesson. Have a hard time, he sighed, seeming to be very regretful, but his face was clearly determined to win. Of pride. Bang bang. With a heavy sound and an earthquake-like vibration, everyone was stunned. Even the fight between Chu Chen and Bai Yinsha stopped temporarily. I saw that bearded man. No, it was He Yanza. I don't know when he fell to the ground. The clothes on his chest were torn, and it was like a palm mark. Everyone was dumbfounded and looked at the woman who walked out of the dust in the sky. Su Yun walked over slowly and turned her wrist casually. You're pretty good at it. Hey, indifference. Chu Chen. Chu Xinggao. Bai Yinsha on the side gave a sharp drink. The sound was so harsh that Chu Xinggao, who was watching the excitement, couldn't help but raise his hands to cover his ears. The sharpness of the sound seemed to pierce the eardrums. Su Yun frowned. The next second, Bai Yinza had already rushed in front of her. His hand was like an eagle's claw and he grabbed her throat directly. She raised her hand to block the move, and used the opportunity to turn around, but Bai Yinza reacted quickly, flipping his wrist, and directly grabbed her wrist instead. Su Yun's arm shook, and she easily passed the seemingly impossible catch. No one saw clearly how she injured He Yinchai, including He Yinchai himself. He clearly felt that he had the upper hand, but suddenly he felt that the opponent's movements were much faster, so fast that it almost dazzled his eyes and made him unable to see clearly. By the time he saw clearly, he could no longer avoid the palm. He originally thought that his profound skills and strong body would be enough to handle this palm, but when it fell on him, he could almost feel the sound of his bones cracking, and he couldn't help but roar out in pain. On the side, Chu Chen originally wanted to step forward to help, but after calming down and looking at it, Su Yun could handle it completely and there was no need for him at all. Although she was very horrified, when did her skill reach such a level, but considering the current situation, this is at least a good thing. Turning his head, he looked at Chu Xinggao, who was half crouched and staring nervously at the battle situation. He obviously realized that something was wrong. He didn't look like he was confident of winning as he did before. He held the armrest of the chair tightly with one hand. You can't even take down a yellow-haired girl. With your little ability, how can you explain to your master if you can't do it? He screamed in anxiety and was filled with anger. Suddenly he realized something was wrong, and saw Chu Chen running straight towards him with his arms straight outstretched. Chu Chen, Chu Chen. Chu Xinggao stood up in a panic and stepped back, knocking over his chair, tripping over himself, and falling back uncontrollably. He didn't fall to the ground. Chu Chen grabbed his arm and pulled hard, and then the other hand pinched his neck. Let them all stop. You dare, I am your uncle. Flustered, Chu Xinggao plucked up the courage to shout. Uncle, Chu Chen sneered, his voice colder than the ice-hardened blade. Sorry, I don't have an uncle. Chu Chen, you. Get them to stop quickly, or I'll break your neck. The strength of her fingers increased, and she pinched his neck with more force. Chu Xinggao felt like he was out of breath, his neck was being clamped hard, and he felt as if his fingers were pinching his own arteries. As long as he applied a little more force, his neck would be broken. At the critical moment of life and death, I can no longer force myself to hold on. I can only bite my back molars and say, stop. However, no one listened to him. Bai Yinze moved even faster and fought harder. Even He Yinze, who was originally injured and fell to the ground, endured the pain and joined the battle. Suyun now has 1 against 2. Stop, didn't you hear me telling you to stop, stop fighting, Chu Zinggao shouted loudly. But still no one listens. The three people were completely deaf to the conversation, as if they were in two different worlds. Let alone Chu Chen, even Chu Zinggao himself was shocked. He never thought that the people he brought here would not obey his orders at all. They were at a critical moment of life and death and might die at any time, but they had no fear at all. Double killing of yin and yang, have you heard it? If you don't stop, I will let you. Chu Chen raised his hand to block completely instinctively. He only heard a bang and a small hidden weapon fell to the ground, an extremely long, narrow, and sharp dart. If he hadn't blocked it just now, he would have thrown it directly into Chu Zinggao's mouth. At this time, his face turned pale with fright, and he no longer dared to shout loudly. Until this moment, he suddenly realized that the yin and yang double kill did not obey his orders at all, and his words had no weight at all in their ears. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 344. Chapter 344, Not him? Obviously, Chu Chen also realized this and took advantage of the situation to loosen the hand that was holding Chu Zinggao. There was no point in holding him now. He cannot act as a threat, and without reliance, he has no threatening power at all. Why, how could this happen? Chu Zinggao was frightened by the dart just now, and his whole body was shaking like chaff. As soon as Chu Chen's hand was removed, his body became weak and slid to the ground uncontrollably. He sat softly on the ground, his eyes wide open and unable to recover. His mind seemed to be frightened. The hidden weapon just now almost killed him. His eyes were fixed on the darts on the ground, the scene just now still revolving in his mind, as if he almost had a brush with death. Hands were clenched into fists, and the anger in his heart was overwhelming, but he did not dare to speak any more and stared hard at the direction of the fight. The three figures were entangled together, but Suyun was not confused at all, and even seemed to be at ease. About 10 minutes later, only 2 bangs were heard, and both yin and yang fell to the ground, especially black. Yin Chai, he was already injured, but now he has been injured even more, and he can hardly get up. You, who are you? Bai Yin Chai asked in a sharp voice. Go back and tell your master, don't stretch your hands so far and mind your own family's affairs, Suyun said coldly. The two people naturally ignored Chu Zinggao, helped each other up, glared at her fiercely, and then jumped up, disappearing after a few ups and downs. Seeing that the person had left, Suyun walked slowly to Chu Zinggao, lowered her head and looked at him. What else do you have to say? You. Looking her up and down, even if he saw it with his own eyes, Chu Zinggao still found it hard to believe that this was the soft and waxy little girl in his impression. He had only been away for a long time. How could this girl do this? Do you have such skill? Are you okay? Chu Chen asked. Suyun shook her head. Apart from being a little tired, she didn't feel any other discomfort. As for the aura that was filling her body, it was fine for the time being, so she didn't think about it. Chu Chen was also greatly surprised by her reaching out like this, but now was not the time to ask about this. Chu Zinggao, when Grandpa expelled you from the Chu family, he originally hoped that you could reflect on yourself outside. Unexpectedly, after so many years, not only did you not repent, you even returned to the Chu family to cause trouble. If something really happened at home Luanzi, how can you be worthy of the ancestors of the Chu family? Chu Chen said angrily. What do you know? Anyway, the matter has been exposed, and Chu Zinggao is not afraid to show his true colors directly. Everything in the Chu family originally belonged to me. How can there be any reason in this world not to pass it on to my son, but directly to my grandson? In the past, it's obvious that the old man is partial to you. Chu Chen, Don't stand here and say high-sounding words. If it's really for the sake of the Chu family, why can't you let me go and leave the Chu family to me? It's all because you refuse to let go. Also, it wasn't you who called the police. Didn't you lose the Chu family's face? He spoke plausibly, without any sign of repentance. Stepping forward, Su-yun looked at him and said, "Let me ask you, does Grandpa's death have anything to do with you?" Chu Zinggao raised his eyes and looked at her with complicated expressions in his eyes, but said nothing. He said nothing, just stared at her silently, neither admitting nor denying. "Is it you? Did you inflict the poison?" The voice gradually became sharper, and Su-yun urgently wanted to know what the truth was. The hands behind her back were already clenched, trying her best to control her emotions. She stared at Chu Zinggao, not letting him avoid him. "It doesn't matter, don't you have already recognized me in your heart?" he sneered and said disapprovingly. "I ask you, yes, or no." Suddenly, he reached out and lifted up his collar, pulled him up from the ground, and glared at him. Chu Chen on the side was stunned. He didn't expect that she had such strength. Just as he was about to say something, his cell phone suddenly rang. He followed the sound and looked over. He had dropped his cell phone in the courtyard because of the fight. He walked over and picked it up. He saw that the screen was still usable except for the cracks. He pressed the answer button and said, "Hello." He didn't know who called him. After hearing a few words, his expression suddenly became very complicated, and he raised his eyes and glanced in Su-yun's direction. Chu Zinggao's throat was almost breathless. He gasped and said, "I didn't expect that after planning for so long, I would be defeated by a stinky girl like you. If I had known better, I should have killed you." Before he finished speaking, he started coughing. At the same time, Chu Chen finished talking on the phone. He put down his phone and walked quickly towards Su-yun. He said directly, "The call came from the police station. The forensic doctor has already produced the results." Su-yun took a breath and stared at him without saying a word. Chu Chen knew how she was feeling, so he continued, "The final result of the forensic examination is that Grandpa died of illness. In other words, he died of natural causes, not murder." His words not only shocked Su-yun, but also stunned Chu Zinggao. "Natural death? Natural? Ha ha ha." He looked up to the sky and laughed, his body fell backwards and fell to the ground. Unable to recover from the extreme shock, Su-yun unknowingly let go of her hand, and Chu Zinggao also fell to the ground. She murmured to herself, how is this possible, how is this possible? I'm surprised too, but it's true, we can go get the report at any time, you." Honestly, Chu Chen did not expect such a result. From Chu Chen's insistence that it was Su-yun's poison, to the so-called appraisal report, etc., they all knew that this was an outright conspiracy and a frame-up. Although they had doubts about their grandfather's death, even though they already had a rough idea in their minds, the suspected murderers are also waiting for the final conclusion. But no one thought that it was not a murder at all, nor who poisoned it, and there was no so-called murderer. So what is this farce? A joke? Ha ha ha, natural death, ha ha ha. Chu Zinggao, who was lying on the ground, raised his head and laughed, even crying. "It's not him." Su-yun woke up with laughter. She looked down at Chu Zinggao and said suspiciously. No. Chu Chen shook his head. "No matter what, after so many days of turmoil, this matter should come to an end. Let's discuss and arrange for Grandpa's burial." Su-yun didn't say anything. This incident was too ups and downs for her, and it was a bit difficult to accept. "Grandpa, are you just sick? Is his illness actually that serious? Come here," Chu Chen called his men with a loud voice, "lock him up and don't let him out without my permission." Regardless of whether Chu Zinggao poisoned his grandfather or not, It was an indisputable fact that he colluded with outsiders to try to disrupt the Chu family. What's more, he had to find out who in the Yu family Chu Zinggao had hooked up with. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 345. Chapter 345, Easy to be soft-hearted. Su Yun returned to the hotel. These days, too many things have happened in the Chu family. Living in the Chu family, I feel that there are traces of my childhood and the shadow of my grandfather everywhere, and I can't help but feel uncomfortable. She once thought that there was a gap between her and her grandfather, and their relationship was not very deep. But after her grandfather passed away, she realized that she missed him so much. Mom and Dad passed away early, and she grew up with her grandpa. Her resentment towards him was because she thought he was too harsh. Only when she grew up did she realize that he was doing it for her own good. Without this little time, I would have been injured countless times. However, Grandpa will never come back. She wanted to avenge her grandfather, but after all the hard work, she ended up with natural death, and she was not even given a chance to take revenge. Still not sleeping, after taking a bath, Yao saw her sitting on the bed in a daze. His legs were bent, his hands were wrapped around his legs, his chin rested on his knees, and his eyes were looking straight ahead, but there was no look at all. This made Yao feel very distressed. Ever since he met her, he had never seen her so lost. Even though she had gotten into trouble with Luo Yuanhang, and even though she had been desperate and came to him to negotiate a deal, she had never been so hesitant and helpless. He wiped his hair with a big towel, sat down next to the bed, put an arm around her shoulders, pulled her into his arms, and let her lean on his shoulders. Actually, for you, it's not for the Chu family. I mean, this result is not a bad result. He naturally received the news and was very surprised. After all, everyone has been tracing the case for so long, and the accusations about the murderer have never stopped, but I didn't expect it to be like this. Looking back, Chu Zinggao probably just wanted to use the death of Mr. Chu to stir up a storm and seize power. It was not his murder. So from another perspective, at least it was not such a treasonous thing as the son murdering his own father. For Mr. Chu, at least it was not so cruel. Su Yun certainly understands this truth, but understanding is one thing and feeling sad is another. Human emotions are not so easy to control. By the way, I just saw a bruise on your arm, what's wrong? As he said this, he pulled her arm over and tried to push up the sleeves of her clothes. Su Yun shrank her hands to prevent him from grabbing her, but she couldn't resist him. In addition, she was already in a little pain. When he pulled her like this, she gasped, hiss. It hurts. He became even more nervous now. He pulled up his sleeves without any explanation, and then saw the bruises on his arms. It looked like a bruise, but fortunately there was no broken skin or fracture. It was as if it had been bumped, so he felt a little relieved. Even so, he still called the hotel and asked someone to send some plaster for the bruise. Su Yun did not refuse any more and let him go. After a while, the people from the hotel brought the ointment. Yao sat down again with the ointment and applied it to her carefully. Su Yun lowered her head and looked at the bruises on her arms. The injury was caused when the Chu family was fighting with Yin and Yang. This was certain. As for when, it was impossible to say. Looking at her arms, they were fair and slender. They did not look very strong, but the energy bursting out of her body at that moment surprised even herself. The situation was urgent at that time, and others may not necessarily see what happened. Only she knew clearly that in the beginning of the fight with Heiyin, she did not take much advantage, and she even lost a little bit. Although she has been practicing martial arts since she was a child, it was only for self-defense and she was forced to learn it. She was not very clear about her own abilities. In addition to growing up, apart from competing with my brothers and Chu Chen, I could only hit the spot, and I didn't feel that I was very powerful. Later, I didn't practice much during the years I went to college. The last time she took action was when she was kidnapped in France. She was a little surprised at that time. Thinking about it later, she speculated that it was the body's potential that was stimulated when she was under great threat, but this time, has your potential been unleashed again? What are you thinking about? After applying the medicine, Yao looked up and saw that she was in a daze. I was thinking about what Chu Chen would do to Chu Zinggao, he sighed quietly. In terms of blood, Chu Zinggao is her biological uncle and Chu Chen's biological uncle. But when her grandfather was still alive, he expelled him from the Chu family. This time, he caused such a big trouble again. Really, don't know what to say about him. And since grandpa was not poisoned to death, this matter is not considered a criminal case, and Chu Zinggao will not be convicted and sentenced. Now this matter has returned to the Chu family's housework. He brought outsiders into the Chu family, and attempted to seize power. These are all family affairs of the Chu family. Now Chu Chen has temporarily locked him up, what next? If it was Chu Chen, he should send Chu Zinggao out of the country. After thinking about it, he said. Just send it abroad. Otherwise, kill him. Yao smiled and shook his head. He won't do it, and you wouldn't do it either. How did you know that I wouldn't? Thinking of Chu Zinggao's extremely arrogant look, he was very angry, and he even poured dirty water on her head. Have you ever thought that once such an unfounded crime is concluded, she and Chu Chen will be? How has your entire life changed? Yao looked at her unconvinced look and smiled, because, you are actually a person who is easily soft-hearted. She is tough-talking, but she is often cruel to her own people, especially her own relatives. Not only him, but also Chu Chen. This seems to be a common trait of the Chu family. Oh, except for that Chu Zinggao. What about you? Turning around, Su Yun faced him, looked into his eyes and asked, if it were you, what would you do with him? She blinked in curiosity, purely because of what he said just now. If it's Chu Chen, in other words, he was analyzing and considering Chu Chen's perspective and character, not his own. Me, he raised his eyebrows, raised his hand and gently stroked her cheek, and said warmly, do you really want to know? Su Yun nodded vigorously, his smile deepened, he thought about it seriously, and then said, if it were me, I would let him stay in Su City forever and never leave Su City. Just in Su City I will leave a place for him on the land where he will grow old. She never expected this answer, I thought. What do you think? You thought I would cut a person into pieces and kill him quietly, he said half-jokingly, but he actually knew what the rumors about him were like. Su Yun couldn't help but laugh, yes. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 346. Chapter 346, just a chess piece. I am so scary. You face me every day. Aren't you afraid? Deliberately making a fierce look, he pulled her waist closer and said against her forehead. Seeing him deliberately making faces, Su Yun laughed even louder, and her depressed heart seemed to be less uncomfortable. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid that you will eat me? Aren't you afraid? He pinched her chin and snorted. Not afraid, shaking her head, she quickly kissed him on the lips, and then whispered, it's not like I haven't eaten before. Yao. Looking at her cheeks that were obviously saying flirtatious words, but her cheeks were quickly stained with blushes uncontrollably, I really wanted to swallow her in one gulp right now. Suppressing his thoughts that were about to move, he just kissed her forehead, and then said, it's easy for a person to die. Sometimes, living is more torturous than dying. Su-yoon fell silent after listening to his words. Yes. With choosing Gao's ambition, if he were really locked up so that he could never leave Su City, and could only stay here and watch everything he wanted to get, but never get it, then that would be true. It is the greatest suffering and torture. This is what is called murder and killing one's heart. He is indeed ruthless. Okay, you are tired these days. Go to bed early and recuperate your energy. After your grandpa is buried, let's go back to Zhongcheng. He arranged the bedding, held her back with one hand, and laid her down. And then said, Since things here are almost settled, Chu Chen is in charge of the Chu family anyway. Chu Xinggao is no longer the leader. Chu Qiudong has also completely withered and has never been here again. She has nothing to do here. Only. Thinking about the two people who fought today, I still have lingering fears. Although she won today, she didn't know if they would let it go, and, although she had heard of the yin and yang double kill, and knew that they were working for the Yu family, this time it was their personal behavior, or the Yu family's. It's unclear who was behind the scenes. The reason why she told those two people at that time was just a guess. To shock her, why did the Yu family, who had disappeared from everyone's sight for many years, suddenly appear? Perhaps she has to find time to ask Chu Chen carefully to see if he knows. Stop thinking. Seeing her blinking her eyes without any intention of falling asleep, Si-Yao covered her eyes with one hand and said in a semi-threatening voice. She didn't tell him about the battle at the Chu family today, and he probably didn't know about it either. After all, only the Chu family was there at the time, and she didn't plan to tell him for the time being, so as not to worry him. I've heard a lot about the new project department recently, and you've done a good job. Yoon Zongchen's voice came from the study, showing a bit of relief and satisfaction. I have spent so much time in vain. Take you home. Outside the door, Yoon Chugzio stopped and subconsciously held her breath without disturbing the people inside. Dad, I told you before, I won't let you down. Yoon Chukian's triumphant voice can be heard immediately. He said confidently, at least I am also a top student in business administration. Just wait and see, I will definitely be able to achieve results that will impress all the old guys in the company. Hearing his words, Yoon Chugzio almost laughed out loud. Not to mention that his so-called top student was just a boast. Even his academic qualifications were sent abroad and plated with gold at his father's expense. Even if he really graduated as a top student, this actual operation will face the complexity of the shopping mall. How can a nerd learn it in a day or two? That is to say, Yoon Zhongchen was too partial and overconfident in his son, so he listened to his nonsense. He was simply deceived. But that's fine, the more stupid this idiot brother is, the easier it is for her to control him. He's just a chess piece. Yoon Chukian continued, but Dad, I'm still a little worried. You also know those old stubborns in the company. They are all loyal to the uncle, and they are very stubborn. I have tested it twice, and I feel that even if I get good results, they may not be convinced by me in the future. Besides, my uncle has a son. Are you sure that the company will be ours in the future? Not too stupid, at least I know there are competitors. Actually, this is what Yoon Chugzio is worried about. She can handle this matter easily at home, but it is not easy to control her uncle's side. She has also made preparations. If that day really comes, she may have to use some extraordinary means. He was thinking secretly in his heart, but Yoon Zhongchen in the room replied, you don't have to worry about this. Your uncle is getting worse and worse now. He seems to be seriously ill. He is just hiding it. I guess he should hold on, it won't be long. As for Chu Yao, a person with no ambitions or abilities is nothing to be afraid of. His voice was full of contempt and disdain. You don't have to worry about those people, just do your own thing well and make good achievements. For the rest, Daddy help you. Yoon Chukyeon was very happy, then I'm relieved. Thank you, Dad. Just take a look. I have contacted Lily, the world's top perfumer, and everything is ready. When our company's first perfume, if it goes on the market, it will be a hit and you will definitely make a lot of money. Well, then Dad will be waiting for your good news. The father and son inside were laughing very happily. Yoon Chugseo's focus was on her uncle Yoon Bokyeon. Is he seriously ill? Can't last long? She knew that her uncle was not in good health recently and rarely came to the company. Most decisions were made remotely, but she never thought that his health would be so bad. And her father obviously knew about it, but he didn't tell her. Since Yoon Chukyeon came to this house, his father has given almost all his attention to the son, but he is as guarded against her as if he were an outsider. I have always known that he was extremely patriarchal, but at that time she had only one daughter in the family, so she was not very impressed. But when his son came, this extreme differential treatment was really, very disturbing. It's hard not to feel resentful. Turning around, she saw the direction behind her. Her mother was standing there, looking at her intently. Her heartbeat skipped a beat, but luckily she managed to stabilize herself and not scream. I don't know when my mother came, but she was very smart and didn't say anything. She took a deep look at Yoon Chugseo, pointed to the direction upstairs, and then went upstairs without saying a word. Immediately understanding, Yoon Chugseo paused, and followed him upstairs quietly without disturbing the two people in the room. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 347. Chapter 347. Is it really impossible? Mom, when did you come back? She asked after entering the room and closing the door. Not long, Yao Ying said calmly, walked to the wine cabinet, picked out a bottle from it, and then took 2 glasses. Then she sat down at the bar counter and motioned for her daughter to come over. He sat down on the seat opposite her, opened the wine bottle, and filled both glasses with wine. Yoon Chugseo sat down naturally and picked up one of the cups. Instead of drinking it in a hurry, she gently shook the cup and watched the red liquid flowing in the transparent cup. Mom, I've really wronged you during this time, she said. I'm not the only one who's wronged. On the contrary, Yao Ying drank the wine in the glass in one gulp, holding the empty glass and staring at the glass in a daze. It's my mother's inability to forgive you. Mom, don't say that. Yoon Chugseo raised her hand and patted the back of her hand. Yoon Chugseo was very disapproving. Things are not very bad, so why do you say such things? It's because I don't have the ability to let that outside come home. She squeezed the cup tightly, her knuckles turning white from the exertion. She gritted her teeth and said, I'm afraid it won't be long before that woman outside also comes home. He will bring it to the house. She had devoted herself to running the Yoon family for so many years since she left the shadow and returned to her family. She thought that with her beauty and skills, she would be able to win over her husband and enjoy the life of a rich and wealthy wife in peace and have a happy life. Family. But Yoon Jongcheng has never been a peaceful person. Within a few years of settling down with her, he began to resume his life of playing with women outside. That was all, and he actually gave birth to an illegitimate child. She endured it again and again, and now she actually brought her illegitimate child home, making it an eyesore in front of her every day and being hostile to her. Mom, didn't we agree to work together? Why can't you keep your temper? Yoon Chugseo said warmly. Don't worry, they mother and son won't be arrogant for long. I don't want to see it for a day. Do you know that that woman is openly calling herself Mrs. Yoon outside? I went to the jewelry store to buy jewelry today. After a pause, her voice was choked. That's justified. My face. You also know what happened to your brother. For him and this family, I don't even dare to recognize my own son. He's really good. Speaking, he poured himself a full glass of wine again and drank it down. That's it? Yoon Chugseok understood clearly. It seemed that she had been wronged outside, so she was so emotionally broken when she came back. But it's normal to think about it. With how favored that little is now in front of his father, everyone can see that his father wants to train him as his successor. Even if not all the Yoon clan in the future will be him. Yes, at least half of it. The woman outside is certainly proud. Of course, if her son inherits the Yoon family in the future, she will be able to live up to her mother's status, and it will only be a matter of time before she gets married. She can't wait to call herself Mrs. Yoon. She has always heard of that woman outside, but has never seen her. Now that her mother is so angry, she is a little interested and wants to meet her for a while. Mom, don't be too angry. No matter how proud that woman is, it's only temporary. In this life, she will never have the title of Mrs. Yoon. Her eyes became deep and she said quietly. Yao Ying was startled. Shwe'er, what are you going to do? Don't touch her, you know your father. With her methods, she would not be unable to deal with the woman, but if she were touched, the husband would definitely find out that he did it. The years of generosity and forbearance in front of him were all in vain. She doesn't want to lose big because of small things. Just like Shwe'er said, if you endure the momentary anger, the ultimate victory is to control the Yoon family. It's still unclear who will win. Mom, don't worry, of course I won't do anything. But no one knows what kind of accident God will bring. She smiled softly, then took a sip of wine, and then seemed to think of something. By the way, Mom, has Uncle not been feeling well lately? You and your aunt are quite close to each other. Have you visited Uncle recently? Shaking her head, Yao Ying said, I have been there twice, but your aunt has always said that your uncle needs to rest. She accepted it, but she didn't see anyone. What's the matter? It's nothing, I just heard what Dad said, and my uncle seems to be dying. It seems that even the mother doesn't know, but the more this happens, the more it proves that what Dad said is most likely true. If the illness is not serious enough, why would you need to be so secretive? What? Yao Ying was very surprised. No way. If it really doesn't work, the company's affairs and the Yoon family's affairs have to be arranged anyway. But when I look at the big room, it doesn't look like what's going on. Perhaps you don't dare to make any arrangements, Yoon Chugseok said meaningfully. Mom, hasn't Yoon Chwe'eo come back yet? I heard that he disappeared. Is this what your father said again? Yoon Chugseok shook her head. No, it was the news from my friend. It was said that Yoon Chwe'eo had disappeared, so the uncle was seriously ill. It seemed that he was going to southern Yunnan to look for something, wood. Then he lost contact. The uncle was I secretly sent people to look for it, but there was no news. It was very likely. Made her hand to wipe her neck, she continued, maybe it's because of this that uncle can't stand the stimulation. Have you seen anything different about Auntie recently when you went there? If this is really the case, how can there be some flaws in that person's expression and speech? There is no way that there is no emotion at all. After thinking about it carefully, Yao Ying frowned and said, if you say that, it seems there is something wrong. Your aunt has never been in good health. She hasn't gone out much for so many years. She seems to have gone out more frequently recently. Many times, I heard that she occasionally went to the company twice and met with several directors. As for Chu Yao, she never mentioned it. Is it true that everything is gone? She was so shocked that her hands shook, and the red wine in the cup spilled out. If this is really the case, then your father will definitely speed up the action. Shwe'er, if the Yoon family falls into that in the hands of the little bastard, we will be doomed. Yoon Chugseok held her hand and said, Mom, that little can't be successful at all. The most important thing for us now is not to deal with him, but how to win over people in the company. I have won over many people before. Yes, it's just that the old guys at the top are a bit difficult to deal with. But if the uncle and Yun Chuao are really dead, this is good news for me. What kind of trouble can that little brat stir up? With his little foundation in the company, who would convince him? What's more, he will soon know that the higher you stand, the harder you fall. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 348. Chapter 348. The show is about to begin. Luo Yuanhang was knocked on the door before he even got up early in the morning. His eyes were sleepy, his hair was a little messy, and he looked like he didn't have enough sleep. He yawned and went to get coffee, and said, "Why are you so anxious about something? Why don't you go to the company? Do you want to be so polite at my house?" Kicking away the things at his feet, Yun Chugzio looked at his house with disapproval. "You can't clean it up properly, even if you find someone to clean it up. Look what you are doing. Who should I look after, anyway? I'm alone, I don't need to take care of anyone, and I don't need anyone to take care of me." He lay down on the sofa, put one leg on the coffee table, took a sip of coffee, and said, "As you wish." Looking around with frowning eyebrows, Yun Chugzio sat down on a high stool nearby, then looked at him and said, "Chu Xinggao is locked up, have you heard? I guess that's what happened to you." Pointing at her, Luo Yuanhang didn't seem to be in a hurry. Calm down, calm down. You are really calm. Who gave me the guarantee in the first place?" Although her voice was calm, it revealed deep dissatisfaction. "Originally I did a lot of things just to support Chu Xinggao, push him to the top, and pull Su Yun down, but in the end I failed. Why is Su Yun so capable? 2 years ago, she would not have remembered such a little person at all, but now, this name appears around her more and more. To her, the name Su Yun is even more annoying than Yun Chukian. 10,000 times. There is no foolproof way to do this," Luo Yuanhang said, still looking lazy. "I have only received preliminary information now. No one knows what happened to the Chu family that day. The people Chu Xinggao brought also there is no trace. Don't you think it's strange?" "I don't think it's strange, I just want results." "Results? Luo Yuanhang, where is the result you promised me?" Stretching out her hand towards him, Yun Chugzio said, "Let me ask you, what should I do now? The results are very important, and the process cannot be said to be unimportant." Luo Yuanhang slowly put down his legs, sat up straight, put down the coffee in his hand, then touched a pack of cigarettes on the table, took one out and lit it. "I'm still waiting for the news. I want to know what happened to the Chu family that day and where all Chu Xinggao's people went. You must know that the people he brought with him were all people from the Guo family. How could they be dismissed so easily? Could it be that there are hidden masters in the Chu family that we don't know about?" Yun Chugzio said, speculating on the possibility. Luo Yuanhang was silent. Actually, he hasn't figured out the reason for this yet. He originally thought about whether Su Yun did it, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that the possibility was too low. Of course, he didn't know that the people Chu Xinggao brought were a double killing of yin and yang, but just because he was still confident after being crippled in martial arts, and arrogantly returned to the Chu family to seize power, he could imagine that the people he brought, not simple. What kind of family the Chu family is like, Chu Xinggao knows better than anyone else. In addition to the disciples he has accepted, the direct members of the Chu family have also practiced martial arts since childhood. It is not an exaggeration to say that everyone is born with martial arts. The foundation of learning is. Without enough assurance, how could he take such a big risk? But the facts proved that Chu Xinggao still lost. That is to say, there is indeed a master hidden in the Chu family that they don't know about. Who could that master be? Chu Chen. Okay, let's not think about who the master is. We are not going to fight, but it is a fact that Chu Xinggao failed. Our plan fell through, and all the investment was in vain. Compared to Luo Yuanhang, Yoon Chug-seo doesn't care much about the so-called Gwa family. What she needs to care more urgently is who can be her greatest help in the Yoon family's power struggle. Not necessarily, Lo Yun Channel shook his head. What's the meaning? I mean, Chu Xinggao can't just accept his fate. He won't give up so easily when doing research. He got to know this person for so many years by the family, how deep the resentment in his heart was, and even after his father died, he came back to the wind and waves. How could he give up easily, and how could he easily admit defeat? Yoon Chug-seo frowned, a little impatient. Do you really believe in that Chu Xinggao? Put all your treasure on him. Let me see. If you expect him to stand up, you might as well just win over Chu Chen. I am not placing great pressure on him, I am just waiting for an opportunity. Putting out the cigarette in his hand, his eyes were deep. I think the Chu family can let it go for now. Now is a good time for us. I have asked people to quietly send out the news that Soo-yoon poisoned the fragrance. Soon, she will be removed from the fragrance industry and she will no longer be able to stay. By then, our perfume will almost be launched. What are you proud of? Seeing his smile, Yoon Chug-seo snorted. Do you hope our Yun's perfume sells well, or does it not sell well? It's not your fault if the sales are good, but if something goes wrong, it must be your fault. In fact, the reason why Yoon Chuk-yeon was still willing to let him be the deputy manager even though he was very angry with Lo Yun Hang was because of this wishful thinking. There always has to be someone around to take the blame. Although he has extremely inflated confidence in himself and feels that this matter will come naturally and there will be no problems, he still has a hand in case the sales are not good, or there is something wrong somewhere. For the problem, just put all the blame on the deputy manager. Of course Lo Yun Hang knew what he was thinking and sneered, children. Don't be too immature. If you turn around and capsize the boat in the gutter, I won't care if you capsize the boat. Don't ruin my big business. Since the two of them had made it clear, Yoon Chug-seo had been very direct when speaking to him, no longer needing to pretend in a roundabout way. Don't worry, it won't ruin our big event. He specially emphasized the word "our" to show that he also had a share of interests in this. That brother of yours is as guarded against thieves as I am. From contact to reception and communication, he does everything in person, so he doesn't need me at all. Of course, I am happy that I don't have to run around and work hard. But the young man is inexperienced after all, so he found it's hard to say what will happen if the ghost is Lee Kwai. Hands crossed behind his head, he relaxed his body and leaned back, as if he were watching a play. In fact, Yoon Chuk-yeon's actions were all under his nose, and he arranged to find people to connect him with. Of course, everything was done very cleanly and would not implicate him at all. That kid was still very happy, thinking that he had many connections, resources, and abilities. At this moment, I think it should be on the assembly line. The show is about to begin. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 349. Chapter 349. She is really thinking. The forensic identification was authoritative, and there was no doubt about the cause of Grandpa's death, so the burial was quickly carried out. After finishing the matter, Soo-yoon originally wanted to chat with Chu Chen about Chu Xinggao, but unexpectedly, she became a hot search topic again. This time is not a good thing, but a voice recording of her was leaked from somewhere. Although it is only a fragment, you can clearly hear her saying that you can add toxins to any spice at will. For a time, the entire internet was in a frenzy. She remained high on the hot search list, and even Weibo was paralyzed. This shows how influential this matter is. The main reason is that this matter is too sensational. If, as a perfumer, You can poison your own spices so casually, then who would dare to buy her stuff? Who knows if there is anything deadly in the perfumes, fragrances, and essences you are using? Things. Soon, things started to escalate. Yao originally wanted to suppress the heat of the matter and suppress the hot searches, but Su-yoon stopped him. It is obvious that this matter was planned. Now that the matter is so big and the public's eyes are watching, if you suppress the hot search at this time, it will only cause a greater backlash and make people think that I am incompetent here. 300 taels of silver. She analyzed it seriously. It's already on the hot search list, so let's leave it alone. How many people have paid to buy the list? It's free. Yao. She is really thoughtful. But, after a pause, Su-yoon looked at him apologetically. Although it is nonsense, this matter may still affect the new students, and may even affect Huanya. I'm sorry. But I promise that this matter will be settled soon, she vowed. Grabbing her hand and placing it in his own, Yao said softly, "You're talking nonsense again. You and I are one and the same, so what kind of consequences will this small trick have in my eyes?" The tone is extremely arrogant, but he does have the capital to be arrogant. To put it bluntly, as the president of Uniasia, he has never seen any big storms, so this little trick really doesn't matter to him. Actually, I can probably guess who the mastermind behind this incident is, but I didn't expect that there would be someone from him in the Chu family. It is not difficult to guess. On the surface, Chu Xinggao seems to have caused the big turmoil in the Chu family, but behind him, apart from the double killing of Yin and Yang, it is still unknown what role Luo Yuanhang played in it. The meeting between the two of them that day was, after all, too far away, so it was filmed, but not much was actually heard. Not to mention the grudge between Luo Yuanhang and her. It's just that this recording was definitely not handed over by Chu Xinggao himself. Firstly, he is still in jail, and secondly, his voice is still in this edited recording, and it is impossible for him to include himself in it. Director, phone number. Over there, Su Feng answered the phone and said a few words, then turned around and handed it to him. Yao picked it up. Although he didn't turn on the speakerphone, he was still very close and could still hear it. The call from the company sounded like it was from the Uniasia headquarters. It said that in recent days, many customers claiming to return goods have come to the counters of the company's major shopping malls. Whether they are used or not, they have bought. It's been going on for a long time, and everyone in the mall is a little bit overwhelmed, saying that if it can't be resolved as soon as possible, the counters will be closed. You need to ask me about this kind of thing? Is the PR department just for free? He said coldly. It's not that he doesn't have ideas, it's just that Huanya has a huge business and everyone has their own duties. A matter like this is crisis public relations. Naturally, it should be handled by the public relations department. If you ask him about everything, then he, the president, I really have to deal with it day and night and I can't finish it. I'm exhausted. Although his voice was not angry, the coldness in every word made the other side hesitate. The PR department is already solving it, but due to the special situation it involves, Miss Su, so I want to ask what the president means. Ask what I mean, Yao sneered, since when did the PR department work so hard? Solve it? Tell me what solution they think of. Of course, it is impossible for the public relations department to have no solution. The reason why he hesitated to ask for his opinion is that this solution has something to do with Su-yoon. Mr. Si. After a pause, he said quickly, the public relations department just hopes that Miss Su can take a break for a while. After all, the limelight is in full swing, which is also very bad for Miss Su herself. Over at the counter, someone has been sent to coordinate. We are also working non-stop to find relevant departments to issue qualified test reports, and have also contacted the media to prepare a press conference on this matter to give an explanation to the public. In fact, From an objective point of view, this solution is already good and very thoughtful. However, if it were not for knowing the relationship between her boss and this Miss Su, I am afraid that Soo-yoon would be kicked out directly and bear the entire consequences of. Because of her personal remarks, she caused losses to the company. Isn't it a great idea? Let's do it quickly, he said in a deep voice, and then hung up the phone. With the boss's approval, the people below will naturally know how to do things. Hang up the phone and turned around, seeing Soo-yoon looking at him, her eyes unblinking. I'll go back to Zhongcheng tomorrow. Take a good rest these 2 days. You've been exhausted recently. His eyes were filled with distress. Can I go? She asked suddenly, making Yao stunned. I mean, can I go during the press conference? I can explain that recording. Recording. I wanted to ask her at first, but I forgot about it as soon as things got interrupted. Now that she brought it up, Yao asked, by the way, I wanted to ask you about adding some spices to the spices. Is something special really possible? He is not a perfumer and is not sure whether this can really be done. After all, he has never heard of such a precedent before. It is precisely because of this that her words caused an uproar. After all, it has broken the perception for many years. If you can poison spices at will and silently, how harmful it will be to consumers, and even to the entire society. You mean poisoning the spices, right? Soo-yoon smiled, and just as she was about to continue, her cell phone rang again. She didn't want to pay attention, but the voice was so urgent that she couldn't help but frown, took out her mobile phone from her pocket, glanced at the number, and her eyebrows deepened. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 350. Chapter 350. Because I don't have it at all. The phone number displayed on her mobile phone was a phone number that was not saved, but because she had met frequently a while ago, she still had the impression that it was from the imperial capital. Pressed the answer button, but she didn't speak, waiting for the other party to speak first. As expected, the caller lost his composure and asked, "Is it Soo-yoon?" "Yes," Soo-yoon said lightly. "Soo-yoon, the Perfumers Association has decided to suspend your qualification, and you need to be investigated." The tone was very rude, even a little condescending. She raised her lips, glanced at Yao who was sitting next to her, and then said, "Whose investigation will you accept?" She probably didn't expect that she would be so calm, or even be asked a question. She choked for a moment, and then immediately said, "Of course you are going to be investigated by the Fragrance Association. Now because the impact you have brought is very bad, we have to cancel it temporarily. I'll make a decision after investigating the matter regarding your perfumery qualification certificate." In order to prove that he was not joking, or perhaps to make Soo-yoon realize the seriousness of the matter and take it seriously, the other party lowered his voice and said in a more serious tone, "Don't think that I am joking with you. This matter will be brought to the attention of the whole world. It has had a huge negative impact on the industry. As a perfumer, how can you say such ignorant words? If the results are verified, your license may be revoked and you may be banned from entering the perfume industry for life." If these words were told to other perfumers, they would definitely be very nervous, trembling, or weak, but Soo-yoon had no reaction at all. She was even still laughing. Hey, did you hear that, Soo-yoon? No matter what background you have, you cannot escape the supervision of the Fragrance Industry Association. Now the association is only doing preliminary work on you." He was still going on when Soo-yoon finally spoke lazily and interrupted him, "Sorry, I have to interrupt you. I just want to remind you that I have never taken any professional qualification certificate exam, and you don't need to revoke it, because I don't have it at all." Her words were so shocking that the other party was immediately speechless. The topic came to an abrupt end, and he didn't even know how to continue. "As for your investigation or discussion, feel free to do so. If my words alone affect the entire fragrance industry, then I can only say that this association is too incompetent. After saying that, she pressed the hang up button. He breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Xiao again. He looked calm and held her hand loosely with one hand, without the slightest bit of shock, as if he was not surprised by what she said. "Aren't you curious?" Suyun couldn't help but ask. "What are you curious about?" "Are you curious that I don't have a professional qualification certificate?" She tilted her head and said with a chuckle, and even playfully scratched his palm with her fingers, "After all, I work in your company, but I can't even practice law. There is no qualification certificate. Is that kind of thing useful?" He looked at her without blinking, and he could see the complete indifference on his face. "It's not that I made it, it's that I really don't care." Suyun's smile deepened. Sure enough, he could understand her. She just felt that it was too formal and dogmatic, so she didn't take the exam. She had taken the perfumer's grade exam before. Firstly, it was because of the initial contact and she wanted to prove her ability. Moreover, at that time, she was not very confident in her level of perfumery. Secondly, it was Luo Yuanhang's advice. He started his own business. When the company just started, it needed perfumers to support the perfume development part. Having a perfumer certificate is a very good advertisement for external publicity. Whether it is famous or not, at least it has passed the examination and been certified. As for the professional qualification certificate, Luo Yuanhang didn't know much about it, nor did he care about it. After Suyun studied it carefully, she found that most of it were very rigid theoretical knowledge questions. Perfuming was originally a very flexible subject, and something that requires talent very much. After reading the book for a week, she felt that there were many flaws and errors in the book itself, and she had no interest or ability to compete with the old-fashioned people above, so she just didn't pass the exam. She has been working in the industry for so many years. She initially stayed in Wulan. Later she made a clear break with Luo Yuanhang and went to Xinchen. No one had ever asked her for a professional qualification certificate. This matter just passed and no one mentioned it. If it hadn't been for this incident, I'm afraid no one would have known about it. She had never passed such a test. Even the Fragrance Industry Association did not expect her to participate in international competitions and win various awards, but she did not even get the most basic certificate. Now that it is said to be revoked, isn't that ridiculous? By the way, the question you just asked me, actually. After a pause, Suyun thought seriously and then said, "It is not impossible to poison spices, but it is just about the consumption in the market. Yes, there is no need to worry about this." Xiao raised his eyebrows, but did not speak, waiting for her to continue. "Because of my grandfather's affairs, didn't I borrow the laboratory of your Suzhou branch for the past 2 days? I just did an experiment on purpose. It is completely feasible to add toxic substances to the spices, and it will not even affect the other ingredients. It's possible to make the original fragrance base so that people don't even notice it. But the biggest disadvantage of such spices is that they are not easy to store. You also know that perfumes and fragrances themselves are volatile substances. Not to mention opening them for use, even if they are sealed and stored, they have a certain period of time. If they are exposed to the air, they will evaporate very quickly. Moreover, it is inherently unstable. How long does it take from being produced in the factory to being put on the market and bought by consumers? Of course, the most important point is, even if I have that ability, I am only responsible for research and development, and the factories that put it into production are. If there is really toxins, the first batch of poisoned people should be those factory workers." Sticking out her tongue, she smiled helplessly. "Besides, what good will this do to me?" Xiao was just curious at first, but after her words, his confusion was cleared up. The public is always blind. Originally, the wind is the rain, and if someone instigates it, the impact will naturally be huge. It's just that the wind and rain can't stand up. Feet, as quickly as they come, they will go as quickly as they come. The only ones who need to be addressed are those who fan the flames. Such methods are not on the table in the SI family, but recently I have been in Suzhou. Apart from the company's own affairs, my attention has been focused on matters such as the Chu family, and I have ignored those stinky fish and rotten shrimps. End of this chapter.